Chapter 1 Reincarnation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yi Si sat on the observation floor of Glory Corporation's main building. By her side lay the trophy she had just obtained. Fate's Second Battle of the Kings, solo PvP runner-up. As Yi Si lowered her head to take a glance at the crystal trophy, she felt an emptiness within her heart. She rummaged through the pocket of her coat and retrieved the cigarettes that she had just bought. Yi Si never smoked, but today, she felt tempted to smoke one. Lighting the cigarette she had in her mouth with ineptitude, Yi Si took a deep puff and immediately gagged. She looked up into the night sky and grimaced. Yi Si caressed the trophy with her slender fingers and raised the trophy up high before shouting in a hoarse voice, "Mom, Dad, I did it. But why don't I feel the slightest bit of happiness? Look, I got a trophy. I have become strong. I'm standing at the top, but why am I not happy?" In this bustling city with neon lights lighting up the skyline, nobody noticed the tiny lone human being. She cupped her face with her hands. It was dry, devoid of even a single drop of tear. Is this what I deserved? Is this what I get for turning my back on everything for the sake of becoming stronger? Yi Si screamed in agony. In the next moment, a laughter that she could not suppress left her mouth. I turned my back on everything. I became stronger. The truth is, I was abandoned by everybody else. What have I done to possess the achievement I have today? I angered Dad to death, Mom left, and I've abandoned all my friends. I was notorious back then. I thought that I was special, I thought that nobody could understand me. The truth is, I am trash. But now. Yi Si closed her eyes. Her mind was overwhelmed by the embarrassment she felt when her right to join the competition had been denied just because she didn't have any teammates, just because she didn't have any friends. Fate is not about individual strength, as the strength of an individual comes from the people surrounding them. Miss Yi, I'm sorry, but the essence of the Battle of Kings is group battle. Without a group that is willing to accept you, we have no choice but to refuse your entry. No groups were willing to accept her. How could any group be willing to accept her? She was the #1 sorceress in Fate, yet the most callous and black-hearted one as well. She had never offered assistance to a single soul in her 10 years of playing Fate. Even in real life, she was the embodiment of selfishness and cruelty. After pulling out her cell phone, Yi Si dialed one of the few numbers that were stored in it. She was lonely. She wanted to speak to someone, anyone. Sorry, the number you have dialed is no longer in service. Sorry, the number you have dialed is no longer in service. 90% of the few numbers stored in her phone were no longer in service. Exactly how long ago had she lost contact with other human beings? The cursor on the screen stopped at the last number. It was a number that she was extremely familiar with, and it represented the final sliver of warmth within the depths of her heart. That person that he might still be around. She dialed after a moment of hesitation. Sorry, the number you have dialed is no longer in service. The cold voice of the receiver seemed to have sapped Yi Si of all her energy. Her situation was laughable. Was there anybody else in this world who was like her? Seemingly glamorous on the surface, yet isolated from her kin. After struggling to stand up, Yi Si threw the phone into the air. Inactive numbers. Yi Si, do not need you people. Before she could finish her sentence, the night wind swept her off balance and she fell down the building. She subconsciously extended her arm out of desperation and managed to grab hold on something. Raising her head, she realized that the object she was dangling from at the edge of this 100-meter-tall building was none other than her trophy. Yi Si was taken aback for a moment, after which tears began streaming out. In the end, was this the only thing she had left? Was there still any meaning to her life? Let it go, let it all go. Let her miserable life come to an end like that, in loneliness and sorrow. Throwing a final glance at the PvP trophy, Yi Si loosened her grip. Endless darkness swallowed her entire being, it were as if she had never existed. A splitting headache came. However, the cozy sunlight lulled her to sleep for a moment longer. The girl on the bed took in a deep breath and curled underneath her blanket, returning to her sweet dreams. 10 seconds later, the soft white blanket was pushed aside violently. The girl sat up abruptly and surveyed everything in the room, looking as though she had seen a ghost. Is this heaven? Or am I dreaming? She muttered to herself before shaking her head, I doubt that a person like me could make it to heaven. She lowered her head and looked at her white, tender hands. Those hands wormed themselves into the comfort of her blanket and forcefully pinched her leg. Ah! She screamed at the excruciating pain, tears flowing down her cheeks. It's not a dream. What happened? What's going on? A middle-aged man with an apron stormed into the room with a ladle in hand. The anxiety on his face was clearly displayed on his face as he asked the girl on the bed urgently, "Ci, what happened? Are you okay? Did you fall onto the floor after a dream again?" Yi Si sat on her bed staring at the man, unable to recover from her surprise. Don't tell me that you have a concussion. Yi Nantian waved his hand in front of Yi Si. Dad! Yi Si grabbed hold of his hand, stood up, and wrapped her arms around Yi Nantian's neck as tears streamed down uncontrollably from her eyes. She didn't want to care anymore. Even if it was just a dream, she'd be happy just to be able to meet her parents once again. What's with you? Yi Nantian was puzzled. His daughter had never had such an intimate interaction with him ever since she was 15. Her sudden change today left him bewildered. Dad, it's good to see you again. Yi Si spoke from the depth of her heart. Tears blurred her vision as she held on tightly to her dad. What are you talking about? You're speaking as though I came back from the dead. Yi Nantian laughed and patted Yi Si on the back before pulling her to the side. I'm going to make breakfast, come down quickly when you're fully awake. He patted Yi Si's head again and walked out of the room. Yi Si sat on her bed and stared blankly at the digital clock on the wall as if it was a magnificent piece of sculpture. August 20th, 2050, 7:37 a.m. Year 2050. It's the year 2050. After being stupefied state for an untold amount of time, she sprang into action. Rushing to her desk, she grabbed hold of a mirror with trembling hands to look at her reflection. The face of a 18 or 19-year-old appeared in the mirror. The face had a healthy shade of red with a little bit of baby fat. There was life and vigor in her eyes. This was her 10 years ago. Yi Si was 100% sure. This face did not have the scar left behind by that car accident 10 years ago. But what happened? Yi Si put down the mirror and looked around the room. There was a bamboo bed, a book rack and a computer desk, along with a Fate promotional poster hanging on the wall. A corner of the room was emptied out. Did she return 10 years back in time? She had returned 10 years back in time. Yi Si's heart initially filled with frenzied happiness, but it was soon replaced with other emotions. God had treated her well. Just when she had thought that she would end her life full of regrets, she received a second chance. Was this a chance for her to rectify her mistakes? Yi Si could no longer hold herself back. She stood up and rushed towards the living room. Yi Nantian was currently busy serving breakfast while Zhou Xiaolan was wiping off the dust from the cupboard. Both of them raised their heads upon hearing Yi Si's footsteps. The first thing that Yi Si saw after entering the living room was the scene filled with warmth that was long gone from her life. She blinked, and there was a lump in her throat. There were countless times when she had thought that she would be a good daughter if her dad could come back from the dead, and her mother would not leave her. She would stop being willful, selfish and rebellious. She would be an attentive and obedient daughter. She would never have thought that she'd receive such a chance. Yi Si bit her lips for a moment before letting out a hearty laugh. Dad, Mum, good morning. Yi Si said with a loud and cheerful voice. Zhuo Xiaolan sat on the sofa while gazing at Yi Si, who had been busying away in the kitchen. She nudged Yi Nantian and murmured to him, "Say, what's wrong with Cici? She seems a little too obedient these few days. Not only did she break up with those friends who were being a bad influence, she even offered to do housework. Something must be wrong. Are you not happy that your daughter became obedient?" Yi Nantian threw a grin at his wife and beckoned for Yi Si to sit down with them. Yi Si sat down with her parents. She was happy, despite not knowing why her father had called for her. To her, the life she was currently in was heaven. She was fine with anything. Yi Nantian cleared his throat and said, "Cici, you once told me that you want a Fate gaming cabin. I promised you that I'd buy one for you if you could get into a university. So, I will fulfill my promise now. The gaming cabin will be here tomorrow." Yi Si was stunned for a moment. Her past memories replayed in her mind like a movie. Yes, the Fate gaming cabin. Her fate was changed from that moment onwards. The fate of her family was also changed at that moment. If she could start over, what would be her choice? However, you have to tell me, why would you need such a high-end gaming cabin? You can play the game with a regular helmet as well, so why would you need a holographic gaming cabin? Yi Nantian was unaware of the turmoil within Yi Si's mind and was silently staring at her with a smile. The gaming cabin was just a bet with a friend. Despite not being rich, her parents were willing to buy the luxurious item for her out of love, one that cost about $100,000. How did she answer her parents at that time? She said that she wanted to soar in fate. What happened in the end? She did it. However, in her quest to soar high in the sky, she had lost her friends, her parents, her happiness, and even her life. It was all due to her presumptuous foolishness and arrogance. Chapter 2 Gongzi You are listening at novelfull.audio. Thinking of her past, Yi Si's blood froze. She gripped the hem of her skirt tightly and loosened her grip. When Yi Si finally raised her head again, the agony and guilt in her eyes were replaced by her will to be tough and unyielding. She gazed at Yi Nantian and Zhuo Xiaolan, the parents that could give their all for her. A surge of emotion she had never felt before churned within her heart. They had once lost everything trying to protect their selfish and foolish daughter. This would be a guilt that Yi Si could never forget. She had made too many mistakes in her past life. In this life, she was going to do it right. "Dad, Mom, this time, it's my turn to protect you. I want to be a professional gamer." Yi Si voiced out her thoughts word by word. A professional gamer. Yi Nantian and Zhuo Xiaolan said in unison, staring at Yi Si in awe. This was unexpected. There were many reasons Yi Si could have had for wanting a gaming cabin. It may have been a bet, or it could be that she simply wanted to show off. It could even be the spur of a moment, but it was inconceivable for her to want it as a career. She was not a responsible person. Despite her parents' shocked expressions, Yi Si smiled. She understood what provoked such reactions from her parents, and she came to realize that she was indeed rather miserable. She affirmed her decision. "Yes, I want to be a professional gamer." After a short pause, she smiled again. "Dad, Mom, you have taken care of me for so many years. I've grown up now. It's my turn to take care of you." Being a professional gamer, Yi Si had given serious thought to it. She knew her own capabilities. Studying was never her forte, and even if she made it through the 4 years of studying in a university, she would still merely lead a muddled life. However, her current situation was different. She had knowledge of what was going to happen in the next 10 years. Fate was operated by several nations around the globe. It had been said that even the testing stage of the game took 10 years to complete, and different aspects of the game were quite developed. It managed to dominate the market prior to its release, and its glory lasted for more than a decade. Fate's achievements brought life to the gaming industry, as well as several other smaller industries. It managed to attract people of different ages and occupations. Fate was viewed as merely a form of entertainment for the young 10 years ago, but within that period of 10 years, it became an irremovable part of human life. Yi Si grew from a newbie to the #1 sorceress within that 10 years of Fate's golden era, and she knew almost everything about the game, including its patches, and even bugs. But in an age and time when Fate was not operational yet, what could Yi Si do? It was, no doubt, her destiny to once again enter the embrace of Fate. But she would do better this time. She would not depend on anyone to achieve success. Her existence itself was like a miracle. While Mr. and Mrs. Yi were still puzzled by their daughter's 180-degree change in attitude, Yi Si was already preparing to restart her journey in Fate. Fate's open beta test was scheduled to be on August 30, 2050, at 14.00 hours. When the gaming cabin was finally delivered to Yi Si, it was already the 6 in the evening on the 28th of August. She bought some nutrient fluid to be used in the gaming cabin with the pocket money she had earned, and after a long talk with her parents, she decided to move into a place of her own. She intended to rent a room not far from campus. Yi Nantian and Zhua Xiaolan finally agreed with their daughter after discussing it for an entire night. She found a room on the 29th of August and cleaned it. Everything was in place by 8:30 at night and the family had a wonderful dinner. The couple could only sigh with emotion as Yi Si sent her parents home. On the 30th of August, Yi Si woke up at 10:30 in the morning and cleaned everything. After having lunch, she connected the nutrient fluid to the gaming cabin and did a final check on the machine. By 13:28, Yi Si had already laid down in the gaming cabin. She let out a long breath before slowly closing the lid. Fate, here I come. Here I come, once again, to my fate. The company that was in charge of Fate was the Glory Corporation, which was formed by members from different countries. The server, with a capacity of 5 billion users, was placed in country Z. It was the largest gaming server in the world. Yi Si remembered that Glory opened their server at 13:30 hours. But it was limited to only 10,000 players. The others would have to log into the game at 14:00 hours. Back then, the advantage given by that half an hour gave birth to a lot of godlike characters. Back then, Yi Si was pissed at Glory for using such measures. This time around, the only thing she felt was endless gratitude. She successfully connected at 13.29.57. And so, Yi Si logged into the game. In her last life, she chose to be a human sorceress. This time, she would become an elven huntress. Yi Si had deep knowledge when it came to Fate. Despite having never tried her hands before as an elven hunter, she knew that such a combination of race and class will be insanely strong in the later stages of the game. A more important factor was that clearing certain missions as an elf could potentially unlock hidden races such as the Sky Elves or the Sea Elves. The former could fly while the latter had the ability to dive underwater. Such racial traits could be considered icing on the cake for a late-game huntress. Having already made up her mind, she skipped almost all the other options and even randomized her character ID. The only options that she had paid attention to was picking elf as her race and huntress as her class. The entire character creation did not last more than 30 seconds. Only when she was spawned in a newbie village did she call out the menu and look at her character stats. ID, Gongziyu race. Elf HP 100 MP 20 Endurance. 10 Stamina. 2 Strength. 0.5 Intelligence. 2 Agility. 6+2, Racial Attribute, Speed. 2 Balance. 2+1, Racial Attribute, Perception. 1+1, Racial Attribute, Trait. Stealth, Racial Attribute, Concealment, Class Attribute, Sly, Diplomacy, Leap, roll, haggle as the attributes were already fixed. Yi Ci was only interested in her character's traits. These specialties would decide the development of a character in the future. Character traits were something that had never appeared in Fate's closed beta. It was a unique attribute released during the open beta. Stealth and concealment were attributes assigned to elves and hunters. Yi Ci specifically went for diplomacy and haggle that were unique to the human race. As a high-tier human sorceress, Yi Ci knew these two human traits well. Diplomacy gave a starting 50 prestige points with every major city. 50 prestige points were nothing in the later stage of the game, but they played a crucial role during the early stages. They decided the number and quality of the quests received by each player. Although diplomacy was a trait that everyone was familiar with during the later stages of the game, the only one that had thoroughly understood it earlier was Yi Ci. As the saying goes, details decided outcome. The rebirthed Yi Ci would never let anything beneficial to slip past her. Haggle was an attribute that must be learned by every class. Money was something very important in Fate. Without an attribute like haggle, one would definitely be scammed by the NPCs. The money in Fate could be exchanged with real-world cash. Nobody would want to see their hard-earned cash being scammed away by NPCs, especially during the first 3 months of Fate when the game coins and real-world cash exchange had yet to be released. Only few players possessed more than 10 gold coins. As such, this attribute was one of the most law-defying attribute. When Yi Ci's sights landed on her character ID, she was slightly disappointed. Gong Ziyu. It was a nice name, but to have such a masculine name paired up with a female character. Yi Ci decided to forget about it. It wasn't a matter she would want to fuss about anyways. Yi Ci surveyed the newbie village after closing the interface. It was like a ghost town. With only 10,000 players online and distributed across tens of thousands of newbie village, it was normal for her to be alone. She turned around and walked up to the chief of the elven village. Elf was a race that she had never played as, but was quite familiar with. In the 10 years of her last life, her footsteps covered every inch of ground. She had completed every single quest, learning everything there was to learn. She wouldn't be boasting if she had claimed that she could identify her location just by a whiff of the air. She knew what kinds of quests were available, which NPCs were the ones offering them, and what rewards she would get by completing them. She even knew what sort of bugs existed. The village chief handed Yi Ci her first mission after a brief conversation. Kill all the rabbits around the village. Yi Ci walked away without hesitation. A unique rewarding system existed within Fate. The first person in the entire world that completed a certain quest, killed a certain boss, or cleared a certain dungeon would receive a specific set of rewards. Despite being the easiest mission in every newbie village, killing rabbits was also the starting quest of the entire Fate. To be the first among almost 1 billion players to complete the quest was a near-impossible feat. Yi Ci could still remember a popular thread in the forums several years after the Fate server had begun its operation. The owner of the thread was anonymous, but he clearly described the reward of being the first one to complete the rabbit-killing quest. The activation of a side quest. Of the countless players of Fate, he was the only one that activated the side quest. He did not go into the details of the reward given by the quest, but he was expressing his regret of a wasted chance to become godlike by not choosing the right character and class. Yi Ci glanced at the on-screen timer. 13.30.51. Chapter 3 The Side Quest. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Fate officials were despicable. Not only that, they had shrouded the closed beta in mystery. The server launch was announced out of the blue as well. 12 days before its launch, Fate popped out just like that, out of nowhere. As if the 10 years of silence from its developers were in preparation for the 12 days of frenzy that followed. In these 12 days, there was only one word left in the world: Fate. As mentioned, Fate's officials were despicable. Even with their endless streams of promotion, there was very few announcements or content about the game on its official website. Things such as character traits did not even exist in the closed beta, not to mention on the official website. The time was 13.30.51, 51 seconds after the server's launching. Even with 9,999 other players logging into the game with YCI, all of them were still tangled with race and class combination, as well as those damned character traits. Nobody could achieve a first blood yet. Although being sure about that, YCI did not dare to let her guard down. Everything had an exception. She headed straight for the house at the village chief's left. Although the quest was to kill the rabbits in the surrounding areas of the village, YCI knew from her knowledge of the game that killing the rabbits behind the house was sufficient to fulfill the rabbit hunting quest. The rabbits at the spot were highly concentrated. There were around 30 of them, but the downside was that the respawn rate was slow. Nevertheless, the spot was very close to the village chief, making it the perfect place for YCI. Besides, she only needed 15 kills to complete the quest. She equipped the newbie equipments gifted by the system and charged into the horde of rabbits, swinging her dagger. Even at level 1, the rabbits' attack damage were not low. Each of their attacks dealt 2 to 5 damage points to YCI. YCI was very adapted to playing as a human sorceress. She was able to maintain an outstanding positioning while dodging attacks with a character that had very low speed and agility. With her playing as the agile and fast elven huntress, she shed a tear of joy. It was such a boon to play as a class with high mobility in the early stage of this game. YCI slew 15 rabbits under 3 minutes and managed to collect 6 rabbit teeth and 7 rabbit meat. She wasted no time to head back to the village chief after collecting 10 rabbit teeth and rabbit meat. They were the quest items required for the Follow-up quest. Although the first blood for the bunny hunting quest was her priority, she could not suppress the greed to get first blood for the next 2 missions and therefore took the risk. She silently prayed that nobody had completed the quest before her. "Young adventurer, you're the bravest individual I've ever met." In such a short time the village chief was bullshitting as usual. YCI immediately activated the skip conversation option. It was common to offend an NPC if one interrupted or skipped the NPC's dialogue, as everything in Fate had 99% realism. One could have the sense of smell, touch, and sight in Fate, just like one did in the real world. Every NPC in the game was capable of higher thought functions. Every single action could affect an NPC's view of a player, which would subsequently affect the quality and quantity of the quests given out by the NPCs. Although certain quests would still be given to players that were hated by NPCs, they could only obtain the high-valued, somewhat rare random quests through their high intimacy with NPCs. This was what made players in Fate appear humble in front of NPCs, even when they were willing to kill each other. YCI, however, skipped the village chief's dialogue without fear, not because she did not care about her intimacy level with the village chief. This was due to one of the character traits that she had chosen, Sly. The description of Sly was vague. Sometimes, you might need to do just that. Sly was placed as one of the last options as a character attribute. On top of its vague description, most of the players would not notice it. No one actually noticed it at the beginning of Fate. Not many chose such an attribute while creating a character. After all, who would want something negative to be included in their character attributes? But a newbie had picked Sly as one of his attributes by pure chance and, out of sheer coincidence, learnt about the true nature of the attribute. Once it made its way into the forum, it became the regret of hundreds of thousands of players. A large number of them even recreated their accounts to acquire Sly. There was only one simple reason to that. Sly enabled a player to interrupt or skip an NPC's dialogue when interacting with it. The NPC would still recognize that the player was listening to it attentively and with good attitude. One did not simply look down on such attribute. Its usefulness to red-named players or those that had low prestige points was very high. Some would even complain that the attribute was broken. The village chief gave Yi Sei a nod and a satisfied smile even after his dialogue was skipped. Young adventurer, you've contributed greatly to the village and you have a very sincere attitude. The Jiama continent shall prosper because of youngsters like you. A system notification rang beside Yi Sei's ear right after the village chief finished his speech. Congratulations for being the first player to complete the quest, rabbit hunting. Do you want your ID to remain hidden? After the baptism of her previous life's mistakes, Yi Sei had learnt the important lesson of humility. Her priority was to take care of her parents while simultaneously leading a simple life. Reputation was no longer the thing that she craved for. She did not hesitate to press yes, after which golden letters flooded the system channel, accompanied by a soft female voice. Congratulations player for achieving first blood for the quest rabbit hunting. Rewards. Gold 1, System Prestige 1000 points. Congratulations player for achieving first blood for the quest rabbit hunting. Rewards. Gold 1, System Prestige 1000 points. Yi Sei looked at the time and let out a long sigh. It was 13.36.42. She had gotten the first blood. She noticed that her palms were sweating, and she couldn't suppress the laughter that escaped her lips. Since when had she become so nervous? Yi Sei was alone in the newbie village. This was why she missed all the cursing from the other players that saw the announcement. Her entire attention was focused on the village chief. Her mind was filled with thoughts of the thread on the forum, the activation of the one and only side quest. Was it possible? Was it even remotely possible? Ah, young adventurer, I can see some traces of gracefulness possessed by the late elven King Dower on you. Are you interested in some stories of the past? It's here. Yi Sei almost jumped with joy. It's true. What was said on that thread was real. She called herself the Great Encyclopedia of Fate, but in all her knowledge and understanding, there was no such quest in the elven newbie villages. No, to be accurate, it wasn't her ignorance. The only reason she did not know of the existence of such quest was because she entirely had no chance of coming across this quest. Nobody else did either. Of course. Yi Sei replied with a warm tone that she had never used before. A long time ago. The village chief began his illustration, but Yi Sei did not have the time to listen to his story. She did not know how long it would take. She once again chose to skip the dialogue, saving it down just in case she needed it in the future. You will now embark on a journey following Dower's footsteps. Oh young adventurer, this is a road full of hardship. Are you willing to walk down this path? The village chief's dialogue was cut short to the part where he offered a quest to Yi Sei. Yes, I am willing. Head to the icy cave and bring me the Fong of Shatter. Yi Sei was no stranger to Icy Cave. It was one of Fate's top 10 preparation dungeons. The difficulty was moderate, but its normal and elite difficulty settings was why players from level 3 to 15 flocked to the place. In her last life, she had graduated from Icy Cave at LVL 18 with a complete set of blue equipment. She was so familiar with this dungeon that she could complete it with her eyes closed. Shatter was Icy Cave's normal difficulty boss. The lowest level requirement was LVL 3, but considering that she was doing it solo, she decided to brave the dungeon when she reached LVL 5. Of course, one of the more important reasons was that she could learn 2 basic huntress skills at LVL 5, Slash and Bout Proficiency. Although a huntress's trademark skill, Pet Raising, could only be learned at LVL 8, Yi Sei was not worried. As a high-leveled mage, one with enough solo experience and knowledge of everything there was to know about Fate, Yi Sei trusted herself to handle the dungeon once she had learned Bout Proficiency. Your Honor, I will do my best to complete the assignment. Yi Sei placed her left hand on her chest, spread out her right hand, and bowed. She could immediately hear the system's hint. Your intimacy level with the village chief has increased by 10. That action was the sincerest form of greeting in Fate. When one greeted an NPC in such way, it could increase his or her intimacy level with the NPC, but it only worked once. It was not a secret in the later stage of the game, but it was currently one of the ways to stay ahead of others. Chapter for the Robin's Bug. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yi Si took a look at the rewards offered by her side quest while traveling towards the next target, Rami the tailor. Much to her dismay, the rewards offered by the quest were still represented by a big question mark. Despite being curious, she could do nothing about it. Hiding away her quest log, she walked up to the house of Rami the tailor. After greeting him sincerely, Yi Si declared her intention and immediately received a quest from Rami. Collect 10 rabbit teeth. When she handed in the rabbit teeth that she collected beforehand, Rami was a little surprised. By the gods. Young adventurer, you sure work fast. Yi Si smiled humbly. She was not fast. It was just the knowledge of her past life. Yi Si immediately received another quest from Rami to gather some fur from the little boars residing at the outskirts of the village. He gave her a skinning knife with only 10 points of durability left. She located the little boar's lair after leaving the village. The attack power and speed of a little boar were notably higher than that of a rabbit's. Yi Si had to fight them one at a time with her level disadvantage. With every attack of her dagger, Yi Si's proficiency with the weapon increased. Although the process of killing a boar was slow, a huntress's prowess in melee combat was much superior to a mage's. The difference in damage output filled Yi Si with indescribable happiness. She had one hell of a time trying to kill these boars in her past life as a mage. In her moment of glee, the system notification rang in her ears once again. Your friend Lu Chang is calling, do you want to connect the call into the game? Yi Si trembled at the seemingly normal system notification. Her attacks slowed down, and she even received damage from the little boar that took advantage of her opening. The pain caused Yi Si to wrinkle her eyebrow. She quickly dispatched the little boar and connected the call. Yi Si had a long-running relationship with Lu Chang. 20 years ago, 4 couples lived in a certain residential compound. They married in the same year, got pregnant in the same year, and even gave birth at the same day. The scene, Yi Si thought, must have been very jovial. Yi Si and Lu Chang were 2 of the 4 children. Their story, however, did not end there. The 4 children played together, and they even went to school together. Despite being separated after residential compound was demolished during their senior years in high school, the 4 families retained their friendship. The 4 children would still remain very close to each other, if it had not been for. Yi Si bit her lip. If only she hadn't hurt her friends time and time again in the search for glory in her last life. Yi Si laughed, as she had the chance to start anew. Yi Si hated the fact that she was trembling at that very moment. When the system connected Lu Chang's call, Yi Si felt as if her heart was being wrecked by a stage .12 typhoon. How long had it been since she last heard Lu Chang's voice? Was it 3 years? Or was it 5? Or was it even longer? Hey! Little Si, are you playing Fate as well? Lu Chang was blunt as always. Whenever one picked up her call, the first thing that could be heard was her crisp voice. Yes. Yi Si wanted to say more after hearing Lu Chang's voice, but she could not suppress her emotion. She was choked with sobs, and that was the only word she could squeeze out of her mouth. Yi Si's personality had always been cold and detached. It did not trouble Lu Chang at all as she continued with a grin, I'm going to play as a priestess. Hee, human priestess. I can heal while dishing out damage. I'll take care of you. Yi Si was momentarily stunned. She remembered that Lu Chang was also playing as a human priestess in her last life. Due to the character's difficult mechanics, her low level and inferior equipment, Lu Chang was always asking her for help. However, Yi Si had been busy leveling up back then and hadn't even bothered to help Lu Chang. She had even blocked Lu Chang off. After that they had never contacted each other again. She was lucky that fate had given her a chance to make amends. Lu Chang was still bragging at how good she would become at the game when Yi Si gave her a suggestion: a priestess can heal and deal damage. If you're doing good, this class could be omnipotent, and if you're doing bad, it's known as the 1000-year benchwarmer. Everybody would want you if you're a master of this class, but the slightest mistake could cost you dearly. Do you want to play as a different class instead? Lu Chang was stunned. Yi Si had never talked much, and although she was great at playing games, she was selfish and would never share information. But what was with her today? Lu Chang? Yi Si asked, noticing that Lu Chang was quiet. Then what class should I choose? Asked Lu Chang after recovering from her shock. The question baffled Yi Si. Lu Chang was always appearance-oriented. She did not care about the difficulty of a game as long as it looked good. Yi Si was worried that she would not be satisfied with her suggestion. How about? Yi Si was unsure. How about a Leaken Summoner? Leaken Summoner. Is it good? Lu Chang's reaction surprised Yi Si. She was glad that her suggestion was not rejected right away. Maybe she never did truly know Lu Chang, but it was still not too late. Lycans have higher base endurance than all the other races. Its racial trait is ferocious, very useful in life and death situations. It can summon minions at LVL 5, and it's very tough character when it comes to fighting, leveling up, or even dealing damage in dungeons. Then I'll go for Leaken Summoner. Although Lu Chang was puzzled by Yi Si's sudden change of personality, she was happy to accept her friend's suggestion. By the way, when you create your character, remember to select traits such as diplomacy, sly, haggle and meditate. Yi Si told Lu Chang everything she knew. How do you know so much? Yi Si was momentarily lost for words before finally coming up with an excuse: I bought some closed beta information from some workshop. That did not arouse Lu Chang's suspicions. She hung up afterwards and prepared for the server to open at 14.00 hours. Yi Si could not suppress her joy. Her excitement manifested into furious attacks against the little boars. After slaying the boar, Yi Si took out the skinning knife and realized that she had learned the skill, Gather, but this was only for the duration of the mission. Gather would disappear after the mission was completed. Although 1 point of durability was deducted when she gathered from a little boar, she managed to collect all the usable materials from the boar, such as boar fangs, boar hide, boar meat, and boar bones. All of those were needed in the main quest. The skinning knife disappeared after Yi Si gathered from the 10th boar. She did not immediately return to Rami but instead went to a particular tree outside the village. She would be stupid if she had completed her quests in order just like a newbie. Yi Si had her own thought in this matter. There was a bug here that had not been discovered until 4 years after the server was open. Hordes of players flocked under the tree to exploit the bug once the information was leaked. This triggered a swift response by Glory Corporation and the bug was removed overnight. Players who exploited the bug received the penalty of dropping 1 level. Yi Si opened the 20-slot newbie backpack, which contained a tiny red bottle and a candle. The candle was for illumination. In Fate, players had to use candles or torches as their light source before learning the skill, Night Vision. Yi Si made a campfire under the tree. She intended to complete the bugged quest before more players could enter the game. She roasted the rabbit meat that had been obtained earlier. Although she had no cooking skills, the meat was sizzling on top of the flame. Caw, caw. A brown robin landed beside Yi Si, eyeing the roasted meat in her hand. Yi Si was generous. She threw little pieces of meat to the robin. She did not, however, throw the last piece of meat out. She held on to that piece of meat and handed it to the robin. The robin opened its mouth wide for that piece of meat. Yi Si paid close attention to that particular piece of meat. When half of it entered the robin's mouth, she pulled the meat out immediately. However, the robin flapped its wings with satisfaction, as if it had eaten the piece of meat. A few golden feathers dropped onto the ground. It succeeded. Yi Si was excited, as the quest was repeatable. When 10 golden robin feathers were handed to an NPC, the player would randomly receive a skill book of his or her class. But the robin was an asshole. It would drop its feathers the first time it was fed. After that, the chance of it dropping its feathers was only 1 in 1,000. Despite knowing that the rewards for completing this quest were good, a lot of players gave up on it. But right there and then, this bug. Chapter 5: A Change of Fate. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Yi Si passed the piece of roasted meat to the robin again, after which the robin behaved as if it has eaten the 10th piece of meat. Repeating the same trick, Yi Si pulled the meat out. The robin was satisfied, and it pecked out a few feathers. The bug was successfully exploited. The robin's programming was stuck at the time when it was eating the 10th piece of meat. It would always think that the meat given to it was the first piece of meat. The feathers required by the repeatable quest could be collected by repeating the process. Yi Si threw the piece of meat at the robin after exploiting the bug for what seemed to be the 10th time. She collected all the feathers, put out the campfire, and headed back to the village. Yi Si could see flashes of light appearing at the spawning point right after she entered the village. The time was February 14, 03. The server was finally officially opened. Wow, I thought I was the first one here, looks like there's someone that made it before me. Shouted an elven warrior when he spotted Yi Si. Yi Si nodded her head as a form of greeting and headed straight for Rami. After receiving the little boar skins from Yi Si, Rami directed her to John the blacksmith, and then the little beggar. Why were newbies always used as couriers in every single game? Yi Si noticed more and more newbies appearing, and soon, the village was packed full of players. With much difficulty, Yi Si finally walked up to little Lemmy. Yi Si let out a long sigh. Moving around in an extremely crowded place was never easy. Lemmy, the chief said that you're looking for something, right? Lemmy was a 4 or 5-year-old child. She looked at Yi Si and blinked, asking with a doubtful tone, "Are you willing to help me, huntress?" "Of course." Little Lemmy showed a worn dress to Yi Si. "My mom's dress was torn. I wanted to sew it back together with some beautiful decorations, but I need some robin's golden feathers. Can you bring some for me?" "Are you talking about this?" asked Yi Si as she handed Lemmy a feather. Little Lemmy was surprised. "Wow. Huntress, you work fast." Completed quest: Lemmy's dress 1, rewards. 1 copper coins, 100 experience points. Huntress, I need a little bit more, can you bring me more feathers? Lemmy made another request after measuring up the dress. Yi Si pulled out another feather. She immediately heard a system notification: completed quest: Lemmy's dress 2, rewards. 50 copper coins, 500 experience points. Yi Si was shocked after receiving the notification. All the repeatable quests she had ever come across offered the same amount of rewards, but this particular one seemed to have increasing rewards. Lemmy requested feathers again and again, which was fulfilled by Yi Si every single time. When she did that for the 9th time, the experience points accumulated from the rewards alone raised her level by 4. When little Lemmy asked for the robin's feather for the 10th time, Yi Si handed her the last feather. Little Lemmy clapped happily and said, "Thank you, huntress. I'm able to repair my mom's dress for your help. You're the kindest, most patient, and fastest person I've ever met." Little Lemmy then pulled out a book and gave it to Yi Si. "I have nothing to repay you with. Take this book as a reward. Sister Horner said that this book contains great knowledge. I can't read, but I hope it could be of use to you. Congratulations for being the first player for completing the repeatable quest, Lemmy's dress. Do you want your ID to remain hidden?" The system was going to flood the screen because of this. Fame portended trouble for men just as fattening did for pigs. Of course the ID must be hidden. Congratulations player for being the first to complete the quest. Lemmy's dress, rewards. 5 gold coins, 5,000 points system prestige. The system flooded the chat with such messages, and YCI had the honor of listening to the players' reaction. Some of the players responded with admiration while others with strings of curses. YC's attention, however, was focused on the random skill book she received. Random was a word that YCI was deeply afraid of. She had never had much luck since she was young. She never got lucky with her lotteries and loot. As for randomized rewards, she had never gotten anything other than trash. YCI first took a breath before flipping open the skill book. Her heart momentarily stopped. Strength conversion. Huntress, passive. Convert 10% of damage dealt into MP level requirement. 1. YCI blinked and looked up into the sky. Had the sun risen from the west? A bright sun hung high up in the sky, and it appeared to have risen from the east. Was her fate really changed? Strength conversion. A skill as overpowered as this could just appear at random. No way. The very existence of this skill was a bug. 10% of damage dealt converted into MP. Even in the later stages of the game, a hunter's skill would only consume 500 MP at most. But the damage dealt. At least 8,000.20000. With this, wouldn't she be incapable of running out of mana? In the game, the amount of MP by a character determined his or her damage output. The hunter class was a pure glass dot cannon, and MP consumption was always a problem for that particular class. An entire mana bar could only sustain approximately 30 skills before running dry. This skill would make her into a killing machine. YCI rubbed her eyes. She could not believe that she would be so lucky despite being surrounded with an aura of misfortune. She could see it clearly. The skill book was resting on her hand, the coarse surface of the paper telling her that the book was real. YCI's hands trembled, and she flipped open the skill book without hesitation. It disappeared into a flash of white light. YCI was feeling insecure even after that. She finally relaxed after confirming that strength conversion was listed in her skill list. That's great. YCI was in such joy that she jumped up and down, attracting attention from the newbies handing in the quests around here. Embarrassed, she immediately turned back to Lemmy and said with a broad smile, "Thank you, Lemmy." Little Lemmy touched her pointed ears and laughed, "Hey Huntress, I see that you're happy with my gift." "Of course. I'm more than happy. Then can you do me another favor?" YCI nodded her head. If memory served, Lemmy would be directing her to the class skill instructor. "The bad guys from the Forest of Stone took the doll that Mom made for me. Can you help get it back?" What kind of quest was this? YCI was shocked. She had never come across this quest before, despite being the self-proclaimed Fate Encyclopedia. Don't tell me. A thought suddenly occurred to YCI, and she opened little Lemmy's character attribute. As expected, her intimacy with Lemmy had reached intimate. She finally understood why there was a hidden quest that she did not know of. She completed the quest very fast, and expressed gratitude towards Lemmy's gift. This was why her intimacy level with little Lemmy increased exponentially to the point where the hidden quest was unlocked. Of course. After accepting the hidden quest from little Lemmy, YCI followed the flow of the main quest and headed for Instructor Zal, a skill instructor for beginner hunters. The Forest of Stone was one of the hardest dungeon in the Big 10 prep dungeon. The level requirement to enter the dungeon was LV8 to LV20. YCI could not clear the dungeon solo. She decided to reach level 8 and contact Lu Chang for after that. With Lemmy's introduction letter and a few pieces of paper, YCI headed to the skill learning area situation at the back of the newbie village. Newbies were still trying to level up, and none of them were able to reach the minimum level required to learn the skill. Other than a few players that stumbled upon the place, Yi Si was the only one here to learn skills. She located instructor Zal and greeted him with respect before stating her intention. Zal did not even respond. He sat underneath the sun, carving an arrow with his sharp knife. His movements were slow, as if he was making the world's best sculpture. Yi Si stood beside him silently. Every NPC has his or her own behavior. They could be jolly, introverted, reserved, or even sly. As for Zal that was sitting in front of Yi Si, he was depressed. Standing in front of an NPC without doing anything was a waste of time, but to get to the icy cave, it was necessary. Zal's pale skin and snow-white hair betrayed his age. An elf's appearance would not change despite his or her age, but the hair and skin of an elf would grow whiter and whiter as the elf grew older. Respecting an elder was a virtue. Yi Si showed patience when facing such elderly instructor. After countless moments, Zal lifted his head and stared at the young elf in front of him with his jade-green eyes. He spoke softly, how could a huntress without a bow call herself a huntress? Chapter 6 The Impolite Black Wolf. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Although Zal was a rather depressed person, he was quite orderly. After receiving Lemmy's letter, Yi Si had leveled up from LVL4 to LVL5. Zal wasted no time in teaching the two LVL5 skills to Yi Si, slash and bow proficiency. Not only that, Zal even rewarded a green bow to Yi Si because she had been highly praised by the other NPCs in the newbie village. Sharp bow. Attack damage 4.10, attack speed plus 1%, level required. 5. Class. Hunter. Although instructors would hand out weapons to players, the quality of the weapon depended highly on their mood. Most of the players received white equipment, while the slightly luckier ones would get green equipments. Only the truly lucky ones might have the chance of obtaining a blue equipment. Apparently, Yi Si's luck was pretty average in this case. She did not complain. Her past life had taught her to appreciate what she had. She had learned not to reach for something beyond her grasp, she had learned not to be greedy. This brought her peace and closure. She opened her character panel and looked at her stats. ID, Gongziyu race. Elf HP, 250 MP 120 endurance. 25 stamina. 12 strength. 15 intelligence. 12 agility. 26 plus 2, race attribute, speed. 2 balance. 12 plus 1, race attribute, perception. 6 plus 1, race attribute, trait. Sneak, racial attribute, concealment, class attribute, sly, diplomacy, leap, roll, haggle. The stats points of every class in Glory were automatically distributed by the system. Of the 8 main stats, speed was the only one that needed to be increased by having good equipment. The other 7 stats would increase by a total of 16 points whenever a character leveled up. All the classes were provided with 16 points. The only difference was the distribution of those points. For example, whenever a hunter or huntress leveled up, the system would distribute their stats points as followed. Endurance. 3, stamina. 2, strength. 2, intelligence. 2, agility. 4, balance. 2, perception. 1, all the stats were perfectly balanced in their own ways. Such automated distribution had its pros and cons. The good thing about it was that it avoided the creation of characters with totally broken stats, while keeping the balance between different classes. The downside to it was the heavy dependency of players on equipment and skills to gain an edge on their opponents. But from what Yi Si could see, this was how Glory Corporation earned its money. When players relied heavily on skills and equipments, Glory Corporation would earn big, as players would definitely invest more money into the game when the game coins and real-world cash conversion system opened. After closing the character panel, Yi Si straightened up her newbie clothing and headed for Icy Cave. Before she could reach Icy Cave though, she needed to visit a place called the Crossroads. All the other classes in Fate, with the exception of melee classes, required different consumables. Mages required different materials to cast their spells, healers required certain mediums, while hunters and rangers that used bows require arrows. These consumables normally cost quite a lot. That, of course, was only a small matter. What troubled players the most was that high-grade consumables were not sold in shops. As for where they were sold, only Yi Si and God himself knew. As Yi Si left the newbie village, she could see a lot of players along the way. Some grouped together in 2s and 3s while others worked alone. They waved about the beginner weapons gifted by the system and busied themselves with leveling up. Or rather, stealing monsters away from each other. Yi Si let out a sigh. She was glad that she managed to enter the game half an hour earlier. If she had entered the game at 14.00 hours just like these people, she would be drowned by the tide of people leveling up. Would she still be able to go to the icy cave? A huntress's base movement speed was 2. It was higher than melee and mage classes, but to Yi Si, it was very slow. She took a staggering half an hour to reach the crossroads that was not very far from the newbie village. She even felt hunger after reaching the crossroads. She slowed down and walked towards a small wooden house at the side of the crossroads. Natasha the elf was sitting in a corner of the house with arrow crafting materials scattered around her feet, but sets of completed arrows were already stacked on the table. Yi Si greeted the elf and stated her business. Natasha was not surprised. She even handed a set of arrows to Yi Si without raising her head. Yi Si smiled and shook her head after inspecting the arrows. Natasha, I want better ones. Hunters and huntresses could use 3 types of arrows before they leveled up, namely crude arrows, 1 damage, wooden arrows, 3 damage, and copper arrows, 6 damage. The prices of these 3 types of arrows were different as well. Each set of crude arrows cost 1 copper coin, each set of wooden arrows cost 20 copper coins, and a set of copper arrows cost 1 silver coin. A freshly LVL 5 huntress would normally not have more than 10 silver coins. They would have even less after purchasing some essentials. Their arrows of choice could only be the cheapest crude arrow. The arrows handed to Yi Si by Natasha were the cheapest crude arrows. However, she underestimated Yi Si. Despite her newbie equipments, she had collected 12 gold coins after being awarded by the system for obtaining the First Blood for 2 quests in a row. With her wealth, Yi Si would naturally prefer copper arrows over crude arrows. Yi Si fished out 10 silver coins from her pocket for 10 sets of copper arrows. Of course, if the capacity of her quiver could accommodate 100 sets of arrows, she wouldn't mind purchasing all 100 of them at once. That was enough to provoke a reaction from Natasha. She glanced at Yi Si with her cold purple eyes and handed 10 sets of copper arrows to Yi Si. Yi Si received the arrows with respect and left after placing them in her quiver. Before she could leave, she heard an unfamiliar voice, "Young huntress, how would you like to begin your journey?" It was Natasha. Yi Si was somewhat surprised. She thought that the NPC was mute. In her past life's memory, Natasha never spoke once to any player. From Dour's past. I will follow the Elven King's footsteps. Yi Si replied with one of the village chief's sentences after a moment of thought. Natasha raised her eyebrows and her ears jerked all of a sudden. She closed her eyes, taking in a deep breath before saying, "Go, young huntress. May Elven King Dour stay by your side." She continued making more arrows after that, as if nothing had happened. Yi Si waited for more words from Natasha, but soon left the house disappointed. She entered the dense and quiet forest from a hidden path at the north. The Elven Forest was the name of the forest surrounding the Elven newbie village. The forest was so big that it was endless. The only thing Yi Si knew about it was that it contained a lot of Elven newbie villages, as well as 3 prep dungeons. The trees in the Elven Forest were enormous. One could only see the trunks and dense leaves of the trees when raising one's head. Only tiny glints of sunlight were able to pass through the leaves, as if they were stars that warmed up the forest floor. With layers of leaves carpeting the ground, it gave off a soft and wet feeling upon walking through it. Unknown species of plants and mushrooms flourished under the leaves. Yi Si walked down a hidden path stretched into the deepest parts of the elven forest, buried by the leaves. It was deadly quiet except for the occasional level 4 and 5 monsters loitering around. A prerequisite quest must be completed before entering the Frost Cave. Avoiding monsters along the way, Yi Si reached the altar of Molar situated in the heartlands of the northern elven forest. A few robed, low-level priests were muttering on the altar. "Young huntress, I'm sure you're here to help us. The elven king did not abandon us." The lead priest was happy to see Yi Si. "What can I help you with, honorable priest? The rat men from the icy cave stole my badge while I was sleeping." "Oh. Do you know that? It was very important. The grand priest will be here for inspection in a few days. If he finds out that I lost it, I'm finished." A pained expression surfaced on the priest's face, and he cast a sly glance at Yi Si. He chuckled and said, "Huntress, if you could help me to get that badge back, I will make it worth your while." Yi Si accepting the quest while sighing internally. These NPCs were very good fighters, but they were still using players as their runners. "Hey! You there, gimme a hand." Yi Si could hear a clear shout coming from her back just as she was about to enter the icy cave. Turning around, Yi Si could see a black wolf running towards her, with a horde of spiders in hot pursuit. "Don't just stand there. Hurry up, take care of some of them for me," shouted the black wolf to Yi Si impolitely while running. Chapter 7 Lukewarm Water. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Yi Si took a look at the black wolf that was actually leaking. In her past life, she would never have even thought of stopping to help. At that time, she had deemed matters that were not related to her unworthy of her attention. However, the current Yi Si was no longer her past self. She drew out her bow despite the horde of spiders that were closing in on the Leakin's heels. She drew an arrow from her quiver and knocked it onto the bow. She let the arrow loose, after which it flew straight and true. Yi Si had never played as a huntress before. But after having spent 10 years playing as a sorceress, she developed the accuracy necessary for launching a ranged attack. The first arrow flew right into a spider's eye. The spider hissed in agony and turned its attention to Yi Si. Yi Si, of course, did not stand still. She unleashed a flurry of arrows at the spider while running away from it. An elven huntress had very high balance. In a high-speed chase, their advantage was obvious when it came to balance. Yi Si kited the spider while leaping up from time to time. She defied gravity, landing on tree after tree. The spider could not even get close to her. She slew a spider and drew the attention of another. Her damage had not been very high, but the copper arrow managed to raise it exponentially. The LVL 4.5 spiders were ferocious. Since Yi Si was kiting and leaping around, however, none of them managed to get close. A vast majority of them could not even close the distance before they were slain and subsequently converted into experience points. Yi Si's aid greatly reduced the Leakin's pressure. He morphed into human form and swung his blade at the nearest spider. The Leakin glanced at Yi Si from time to time. He could not help but marvel at the elven huntress' graceful and precise movements, as well as her ruthless attacks. Even if they'd never crossed swords, the Leakin could tell from the excellent positioning and the extremely fast reaction speed of the elven huntress that she was an expert when it came to PvP. But the Leakin was more amazed by how adept the elven huntress was at controlling her character. The server was open for only a few hours, but she had already reached LVL 5, only LVL 5 characters could obtain beginner class related weapons. Besides that, the way she moved about was not something that a newbie could pull off. She looked more like an expert that was smuffing. Was fate openly tested before? Other than the beta test that was so shrouded in mystery that its very existence was debatable, there was no other occasion. The Leekan's curiosity towards Yi Si increased. They took care of the horde of spiders in no time. Before Yi Si could speak, the Leekan was already smiling at her. Thank you so much, Huntress. Yi Si felt slightly reserved. She was never good when it came to interacting with people. She nodded and said after a slight pause, "You're welcome." With that she turned around with the intention to leave. The Leekan did not feel awkward despite Yi Si's reserved attitude. He laughed and said, "I'm lukewarm water." That was close. I could have died. Judging from what he said, Yi Si could tell that he had died more than once. It's okay even if you die. There's no death penalty before you reach LV10. Said Yi Si with a smile. I know, but if I die, I need to get back here from the village. Just so you know, it's not simple. Lukewarm water explained. He shook his head and let out a sigh. It was Yi Si's turn to be curious. Lukewarm water's equipment was clearly pre.LVL5. Common sense dictated that he should be questing near the Leekan newbie village. Even when Leekan villages were pretty close to the Elven villages, there was no reason at all for him to be questing on the Elven side. What are you doing here? I'm questing, of course. Said Lukewarm Water without hesitation. He raised his eyebrow after sizing up Yi Si. Oh yeah, isn't an elf supposed to be questing in Elven territory? What are you doing in the Leekan Black Forest? This. Isn't this like the kettle calling the pot black? Yi Si was baffled. Could Lukewarm Water be one of those people with absolutely no sense of direction? She pursed her lips and said, "This is the Elven Forest." Lukewarm Water's attention was still focused on the altar of Molar. He was surprised by Yi Si's words. He stared at her and grabbed his hair. It can't be. At this point, Yi Si was fully aware that Lukewarm Water was an idiot with no sense of direction. She nodded her head, "This is the Elven Forest." Damn. Lukewarm Water cursed under his breath, "I got it wrong again. I've wasted my 30 minutes of advantage just by navigating around the map." He then looked at Yi Si and let out an embarrassed laugh. "See, I've been so long-winded that I did not even ask for your name yet." Gong Ziyu. Yi Si made no attempt to hide her name. After all, the Leekan had already introduced himself. This is a rather. Lukewarm Water stole a glance at Yi Si and said, "A very, very gender-neutral name." Yi Si knew this would happen. If a character's gender in Fate was not set according to the player's original gender, she would have been mistaken as a ladyboy. It is very neutral. Said Yi Si with a sigh. She was ready to part with Lukewarm Water and head into the icy cave. Wait. Lukewarm Water stopped Yi Si. "Little you, I still have something I need to ask you." Little you. Yi Si was even more baffled. Lukewarm Water was acting as if they had known each other well. The problem was that they had just met. "What is it?" "I'm from blank space, and I can see that you're a pro. You're a good person too. Do you want to join our guild?" Lukewarm Water was straightforward. Yi Si was stunned. It was not because of Lukewarm Water's invitation. Blank Space had a feud with her in her last life. At that time, she stole a field boss from Blank Space alone. Not only did she steal a tremendous amount of experience points from the guild, she stole many top-tier items as well. Blank Space was, of course, significantly angered by her action. Blank Space hunted Yi Si down for nearly half a year. She fought back every time and killed hundreds of their members. Blank Space was bullying the weak, but Yi Si was the one who started it. Lukewarm Water was worried when he received no response from Yi Si. "Don't tell me you've never heard of us. We're one of the top 10 guilds in Z country. Of course I've heard of it, said Yi Si with a smile. Not only had Yi Si heard of the guild, she was also very familiar with it, in her past life of course. If it's about joining up, I have no such intention yet. But I'm willing to help if you guys run into trouble. Lukewarm Water did not attempt to persuade Yi Si. He added Yi Si as his friend and said, okay, let's work together in the future. It was only for courtesy's sake. Both of them knew that. Blank Space was a guild with the capabilities of making it into the top 10 of an entire nation. They had a lot of experts, therefore they wouldn't need outside help, especially from someone that they barely knew. Despite that, it was still nothing bad to have a friend. The fastest route to get back to the Leakin newbie village from the Elven Forest. Suicide. Lukewarm Water waved goodbye to Yi Si and rushed into a swarm of monsters. Within moments, he was gone. Yi Si saw her encounter with Lukewarm Water as an interlude in her new journey in fate. She did not take it to heart. The icy cave was situated in a dense part of the forest, northwest of the altar of Molar. It was hidden but not hard to find. It was all thanks to the gathering stone that shone with holy light just outside of the entrance. There was an eternally lit campfire underneath the gathering stone, but it was so common that most newbies would fail to notice it. Yi Si took one of the thicker burning sticks that functioned as a torch and headed into the icy cave. A flash of blue light later and Yi Si was already in the icy cave. Before clearing a dungeon in normal difficulty, it was impossible to unlock the higher difficulties of a dungeon. The difficulty of the icy cave was set to normal when Yi Si entered the dungeon for the first time. Yi Si lit up the torches placed in the icy cave with expertise and brought lighting to the pitch-black cave. The dungeon at the normal difficulty setting was easy for Yi Si. She headed deep into the cave after lighting up the torches at the entrance. The mobs in the dungeon were tougher than the ones outside, and if one ran into an elite, it would be harder to kill. However, all those were nothing to Yi Si. She moved effortlessly in the cave, clearing a path without even the need of consuming a single health potion. Yi Si managed to reach the deepest part of Icy Cave in no time. 3 bosses were present. The first one was Satyr the Wild Boar, and the other 2 were his Ratman bodyguard and a Kobold bodyguard. The 3 of them were far away from each other and they did not move together. It was easy to take care of those 3. They fell and were converted into experience points that flowed into Yi Si's EXP gauge after some intense kiting. As Satyr died glaring at Yi Si, the system notification chimed in, "Congratulations for being the first player to clear the dungeon Icy Cave, do you wish for your ID to be hidden?" Chapter 8 Clingy Wolf. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yi Si chose to hide her ID as usual. Just then, a golden word "World" flashed across the screen. Congratulations player for being the first to complete the dungeon Icy Cave on normal mode, rewards. 10 gold coins, system prestige 5,000 points. Are they even human? The game has only just started and someone already cleared the dungeon. What the hell? Must be an alpha tester. Alpha tester my ass. Fate never had an alpha release. A random human player, boss, should we investigate? It must have been those group of people who entered first. It's just a normal dungeon. There's no need to muster a large force over something like this. Just look for someone to keep an eye out on the situation, a human cleric calmly replied in the private chat after killing off the last monster. A random orc player. Little Seventh, go check who cleared the dungeon. An orc warrior announced his order through the private chat. Lukewarm Water, who had just ran into the Leakin Black Forest, heard the system announcement and scratched his head. To think someone has already cleared the normal dungeon. Just who is it? Then realization suddenly hit him. The Icy Cave seemed to be within the Elven Forest. If his source was reliable, it should be around the place where he and that Gongzi you had met. Could it be that? Lukewarm Water shook his head, then reconsidered inwardly. Even if her skills are great and her positioning was good, there's no way she could have cleared the dungeon so fast. Moreover, the system didn't announce that it was a party, so it seems like it was cleared by a solo player. Moreover, she is a huntress. That shouldn't be possible. Just as he was grasping onto the situation, the external guilds were getting noisy in the voice chats, all because of this incident. Since the game server was just opened, there weren't any guilds created yet, therefore no one was able to use the guild voice chat provided in the game. Due to that, the major guilds were all using an external voice chat system for easy communication with their guild members. Lukewarm listened to the animated chat within the guild. He had some hunches, but since he wasn't too sure about himself, he'd rather remain silent instead of bringing it up to the guild. In contrast to the liveliness of his guild, the guild master of Blank Space spoke calmly as he usually did. If you guys have time to discuss this, why don't you all quickly grind to raise your levels? It's just a dungeon on normal mode. Our target is to conquer the dungeons on hard and expert mode. As a person who rarely spoke in public channel, his single statement immediately garnered the support from all of the players. After chatting for a while, he switched into the management channel. 9 Knights, go investigate the person who cleared the dungeon. Don't forget to identify which guild he is from. Roger. Yi Si, who had been in the icy cave the whole time, had no idea how much of an uproar a single system announcement message had caused in the entire fate. She just knitted her eyebrows together, studying the few items in her hands. She had thought that being able to get her hands on a heaven-defying passive skill book like the Strength Conservation would have allowed her to be on the road of fortune. However, reality had proven that an unlucky person like her would not escape the clutches of bad luck so easily. Other than dropping the 2 quest items that she needed, along with 3 weapon exchange crystals, she only received 2 bottles of medium health potions, 40 silver coins, and a white-grade dagger from the 3 bosses. What the hell? What in bloody hell was that? She got the first kill. And she did it solo. No matter how you saw it, a blue-grade weapon should most likely be dropped instead. How did it turn out like this? Not only was there no blue-grade weapon, there wasn't even a green-grade weapon in sight. Who had ever heard of a boss dropping a white-grade weapon? Who? This basically just broke the history record among all the disgraces a game could have. She sighed a few times before accepting her fate and dumping these items into her bag. As Yi Si wearily looked at all the rubbish she had picked up from the dead bodies along the way, she only felt like crying a stream of tears. Exiting the icy cave dejectedly, she cleared the contents of her bag at a shop just outside of the Forest of Stone. After that, Yi Si once again marched valiantly into the icy cave. She believed that she'd eventually get something nice if she kept trying. After all, there was no way she'd be so unlucky every single time. Nevertheless, reality had proven time and time again that Yi Si's luck was just that bad. She repetitively visited the icy cave about 7 or 8 times. The crystals used for weapon exchange had been accumulated to almost 30, yet she still didn't manage to get even one of the Icy Cave's signature weapon from the Icy series on her hands. Her experience points were instead going up rapidly and, in the blink of an eye, she was nearly level 8. Yi Si sat beside Shatter's dead body, crying invisible tears and looking at the loot in her hands. No way. Could it be that her luck was completely used up after getting that strength conversion skill book? The arrows she had on her right now were almost depleted too. To waste her time any further here was pointless, so Yi Si decided to return and stock up at the newbies' village first before coming back again. The crystal that exploded from the boss body could be exchanged for green-grade equipment at the altar of Molar. Although these equipment were slightly inferior to the weapons dropped in the dungeon, they were still way better than those extremely expensive white-grade weapons sold in stores. For people like Yi Si who had farmed from dungeons yet weren't lucky enough to obtain equipment drops, these green-grade equipment were their best options. With the 30 crystals she had on her hands, she only had enough to exchange for one equipment. After pondering for a long time, she finally decided to trade for a pair of shoes. Molar's boots. Defense 11. Endurance +1, speed +1. Defense and endurance didn't matter much to Yi Si. That little extra boost of speed was what she needed the most. As long as her speed was high enough, it would bring her attack and evasion up to another level. She took a few steps after putting on her Molar's boot. They felt slightly more comfortable than the newbie's shoes. However, the appearance of these shoes were still too normal looking and weren't much different than the newbie's shoes. But she couldn't care less about it. At least no one would be able to tell what was different about her. Upon her arrival to the newbie village, Yi Si immediately ran towards the village chief. "Oh, it is you, my hard-working huntress. I thought you must have been eaten by Shatter. I truly didn't expect that you would be able to return here unscathed. It seems like the blessing of the Elven King Dower is upon us." The village chief was about to babble on with his meaningless monologue again. For the sake of the rewards, however, Yi Si smiled and waited for him to finish with his useless words instead of choosing to skip. She had always known that the rewards for this type of quest were not bad, but she did not expect them to be so favorable. 1 gold coin and 1 talent point. Yi Si couldn't care less about the money. Compared to the money, that 1 talent point was far more priceless. In Fate, characters beyond level 10 would be able to learn different talents. Every talent emphasized on different areas which could in turn affect the future growth of each character differently. Every player was allowed to select different talents, and everyone was also allowed to select up to 3 talents at the same time. As long as you had enough talent points, there would be no issues if you maximized every talent attribute. The only concern was that in Fate, the game would reward 1 talent point each time a player leveled up. Additional talent points would need to be collected through some specific first kills or quests of a similar nature. In other words, under the condition where players had the same level and equipments, players with more talent points would have more heaven-defying character attributes. This was also the reason why Yi Si's mood was lifted. The village chief continued to chatter on for a while before announcing the second quest. This was still to be carried out at the Icy Cave, but her target this time was the Icy Cave's boss on hard mode, Shatter. "Huntress, you will definitely be rewarded handsomely if you are able to return to me with the head of Shatter." The corner of the village chief's lips curled into a smile, after which he motioned for Yi Si to come closer. "But you are not allowed to tell Guard Officer Tony that it is you who killed Shatter," he whispered. Yi Si raised her eyebrows. This newbie village's village chief, who appeared to be a simple and honest man, was apparently not too honest. It seemed like he intended to take credit for the head of Shatter and find Tony for rewards. Since he was unkind, then he shouldn't blame her for being unjust. To Yi Si, she wouldn't be able to forgive herself if she didn't slaughter this fat pig that had voluntarily presented itself on her front door. She crinkled her eyes and gave him a non-scheming smile. "Of course, village chief. I will surely follow your orders, only that." She trailed off here and didn't continue her sentence. She believed that a treacherous man like him would definitely understand what she had meant. As expected, the village chief quickly nodded in agreement. "Of course." Yi Si then found another skill book in her hands. "If you can bring the head of Shatter back without letting a word of it escape." The village chief trailed off and paused for a moment like Yi Si did just now, as if he still had more to say. Yi Si promptly looked at the book in her hands. Fire Arrow Crafting. Crafts arrows that deal fire damage. Requires mid-tier arrow crafting. Yi Si raised an eyebrow. This book was good, but she didn't have the arrow crafting skill. This meant that the book was of little value to her. Looking at Yi Si, who wasn't too satisfied, the village chief continued calmly. "My young huntress, you will have bread as long as you have enough wheat." Oh, so that was how it was going to be. Yi Si couldn't help but secretly spit. This village chief was a sly old fox through and through. He went as far as to bait her with a carrot that she couldn't sink her teeth into. Was he treating her like a donkey? For the sake of that one talent point, however, she'd still play the role of the donkey. And so, like two unscrupulous businessmen with their respective ulterior motives, they joyously reached a deal with dazzling smiles on both their faces. The icy cave on hard mode was not somewhere Yi Si could solo play. She looked at the time and found out that it was about 9 at night. Without much hesitation, she went to somewhere secluded in the newbie village and logged off. After having casually found something to eat, she received a call from her parents who bombarded her with questions and ordered her around as usual. It was almost as if they were afraid that Yi Si would starve herself to death. Not long after, when she had finally hung up on her parents' call, Lu Chang's call came through. The two of them exchanged a few pleasantries. Lu Chang could hardly even wait for Yi Si's question and had already jumped straight to showing off to Yi Si. Let me tell you this. My Leaken summoner had reached level 3. Did you know that? My speed of leveling up is simply terrifying. Let me tell you this, I formed a party with a few people and I am now hunting the poisonous spider in the Leaken Black Forest. If anyone bullies you, just tell them my name, the Clingy Wolf. Big Sister got your back. Chapter 9 Old friends, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Yi Si suppressed a laugh and nodded, yes, Big Sister Clingy Wolf. No matter how she looked at it, the name was rather comical. But she would never say it out loud, not ever. Oh yes, I've just found out that Dong Yin and Yi Tsang are playing this game as well. Lu Chang changed the topic abruptly. Yi Si was lost for words. The four of them grew up together. They went to school together, came home together, sat for exams together, received their results together, got beaten up by their parents together, even their birthdays were celebrated together. In spite of everything, people change. Yi Si became lonelier and lonelier as she grew up. Since when had her happy years started to change? Was the change brought about by herself? Yi Si couldn't even muster the courage to remember how badly she had hurt Dong Yin and Yi Tsang in her past life. She trembled after their names were mentioned by Lu Chang, a searing pain spreading across her chest. Little Si, what happened to you? Lu Chang raised her voice after receiving no response from Yi Si. It pulled her back into reality. Nothing, I'm listening. Yi Si hid her absent-mindedness with a smile. She was reborn. She was given the chance to make amends, to save her relationship with Dong Yin and Yi Tsang. Lu Chang continued yapping away for quite some time and finally hung up the call after they exchanged their in-game IDs. Of course, Lu Chang laughed at Yi Si's neutral name. Yi Si laid there on the bed, unable to sleep well. Images of her childhood flooded her mind. She didn't have much of the memories after she had grown up. She couldn't even remember the things she had done in those 10 years of her previous life. She could only vaguely remember making a lot of mistakes, and now was the time to rectify them. Although she restlessly slept, Yi Si woke up at 7 in the morning due to her circadian clock. After washing her face, Yi Si entered the game again. Before she could enter the game, there was a new patch to be installed. It was a newly added ranking system. There was an option, do you want your ID to be listed in the rankings? Yi Si declined. This time, she intended to lay low. She could see the rankings right after logging into the game. In Yi Si's memory, the ranking system was also released on the second day of Fate. Her rebirth did not cause much of a butterfly effect to the world. Yi Si hesitated for a moment before clicking on the rankings. She was curious to see if the people she knew in her previous life would be listed. Even if they were her adversaries, even if the only thing she could remember about them were their names, even if they were her friends. Perhaps she had no friends at all back then. Fate was very pragmatic when it came to the ranking system. It ranked only 5 simple factors that were able to directly represent a player's strength: level, wealth, equipment, quest completion, and karma. There was also a guild ranking right below the personal ranking. The guilds were ranked by their wealth, equipment, quest completion, and karma. The guild ranking was empty, as no guilds that were recognized by the system had been formed yet. Only the names of the top 20 players of each category would be showed on the ranking board. YCI could only search for familiar names from the 100 names that were listed. Fate's server was a global server, therefore the names of a few foreigners could also be seen on the board, automatically translated by the system. One in particular caught YCI's attention: Fleeting Time. If YCI remembered correctly, Fleeting Time was an American player that she had fought against in the PvP competition. He was an elven hunter. They were matched up against each other 3 times. The first 2 of their matches ended in a draw, but in the last match, she was completely destroyed by his unpredictable movements, extreme positioning, and ruthlessly fatal attacks. That match made YCI realize that Fleeting Time intentionally hid his true strength in the earlier matches. YCI undoubtedly lost that battle and had not been able to get first 3 for the PvP match. When YCI once again mustered the courage to fight against him, he had disappeared. This had been one of YCI's lifelong regrets. Ever since that season's PvP match, Fleeting Time was given the title of the Hunter God. Videos of his gameplay went viral on the internet with millions of views. It was that fight which had caused YCI to wholeheartedly study everything about the Hunter class. From there, she extended her research to all of Fate. She could not help but laugh. She should thank Fleeting Time. If it hadn't been for him, she would not have been able to know so much about Fate after her rebirth. This time, she would definitely duel with this person again. As a huntress against a hunter. Chinese players were veterans and it came to games that required much investment in terms of time and money but offered little content to the players. No foreigners could ever hope to compete with China when it came to leveling up. The top 5 players on the level rankings were all players from China. Let Go of That Girl, Golden Man, Clear Skies Snowy Land, Colt Foot, The Name of a Flower, and 7 Leaves Flower. Not only did they level up fast, their names had also appeared on other rankings aside from the Karma rankings. YCI could not hold back her laughter. Rebirth. She could still meet someone she had known through her rebirth, even though they had once been enemies. Despite having been so, these familiar names touched her heart deeply. YCI looked at Let Go of That Girl, who was ranked number 1 in the level rankings. This person was very close to her level, which was 40% of LV7. She knew all the shortcuts and bugs, but somebody was still able to catch up with her. He must have skipped sleep to do just that. Closing the rankings list, YCI decided to replenish some arrows. She would once again challenge Icy Cave. She refused to believe that she had such bad luck. Before she could reach Natasha's little cottage at the crossroads, YCI received a friend invitation. It was from Lu Chang's Clingy Wolf. YCI accepted the friend request without thinking. Lu Chang's crisp voice entered her ears right after, Hey, what's the level of my little Gongzi? YCI's attributes were hidden. Even if it was open for public viewing, the players could only see her equipment but not her name and level. What is your level? YCI did not reply, and instead had thrown the question back. Lu Chang was happy to answer that question. The main reason for her to wake up so early in the morning was to brag. She did not sleep until 4 a.m. in the morning after cutting her call with YCI. I am LVL 5 now. I've finally learnt my first skill. I can summon fire minions now. Waha. I bet you're jealous. Lu Chang bragged non-stop in the voice chat. If there was no ceiling in her house, her wolf's tail would have risen right up into the sky. Tell me, which map do you want to go to? Don't hesitate. Your sister, will take care of you. I'm strong. Against monsters, I show no mercy. Lu Chang was still yapping happily when Yi Si asked curiously, weren't you only LVL3 when you called me last night? Ah. Lu Chang was momentarily lost for words. It took her a while to admit to Yi Si that she had joined a party and was busy leveling up throughout the entire night. Yi Si sighed. You could rest in a gaming cabin, but it was nowhere as comfortable as a bed. She asked, you want to go explore a dungeon? The dungeon. Lu Chang's eyes immediately lit up after hearing the magic word. She nodded her head rapidly. Come to the Elven Forest, I'll wait for you at the crossroads. We're going into the icy cave. Sure. I'll be there right away. Lu Chang immediately abandoned the idea of looking for handsome men at the village entrance. She headed straight for the Elven Forest, and with glittering eyes, she asked, isn't Icy Cave the dungeon that got completed solo by a mysterious person yesterday? The certain, mysterious person, coughed slightly and said, get Dong Yin and Yi Tsang to join us as well. Forget about them. One of them is a human and the other is an orc. They're like 10,000 miles away from us. I've just talked to them, they're only LVL3. Since there was nothing Yi Si could do about it, she opted to ask for Dong Yin's and Yi Tsang's ID and added them as friends. The four created a voice channel and began to chit-chat. Lu Chang's voice was the loudest as usual. She spared no effort in bragging to Dong Yin and Yi Tsang, provoking jealousy from the duo. Yi Si could feel a long-lost warmth creeping into her heart as she listened to their interaction. It was as if she was back in her childhood days. Chapter 10. If you can find that map, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Within a night, players who had reached LVL5 appeared like bamboo shoots that had sprung up after the rain. Lu Chang gaped at the sheer number of players gathered near the entrance of Icy Cave as she arrived there with Yi Si. Wow, you can't be serious. So many have reached LVL5. Lu Chang eyed the weapons and equipments of the players with doubt clearly written on her face. She mumbled, it's so hard to level up in Fate, are they on steroids or something? How could they do it so fast? Yi Si did nothing but smile. It was easy to level up pre-level 10. Once they went past the LVL 10 threshold, however, even raising their level by 1 would be as hard as climbing up the sky. Let's go into the dungeon. Yi Si said to Lu Chang. Lu Chang could not recover from her shock for quite some time. She scanned the player-formed party with doubtful eyes after spacing out for a short moment. She was right. Her eyes were not lying to her. What's more, she had just noticed that there were only 2 people in her party. Say, you must be having a fever. Just the 2 of us. Of course. Yi Si, even though I'm level 5, even though I have the capability of summoning some minions to use as meat shields, you can't act so rashly. Spoke Lu Chang as if she was a senior showing her junior the ropes. The dungeons in Fate have very high difficulty, don't underestimate the prep. Dungeons. Yi Si smiled. She interrupted Lu Chang, who looked like she had more to say. We're just going in to have a look. We'll just go as far as we can. There's no death penalty anyway. In the worst case scenario, all we have to do is to restart our progress. How about adding more members into our party? Yi Si flashed an unfathomable smile at Lu Chang and walked away from her. She lit up a torch and said to Lu Chang, are you that afraid to die? Lu Chang looked at Yi Si and scratched her head. She gritted her teeth and walked up to Yi Si, fine. I don't mind dying. Lu Chang was prepared to die, but with Yi Si around, it would be quite hard for her to lose her life. Even after Satyr and his 2 bodyguards had been slain, Lu Chang was still stupefied. It did not feel real for her. Lu Chang, come get the loot. Other than leveling up Lu Chang, Yi Si invited her to the dungeon for a change of luck. Even when one was riddled with misfortune, luck will eventually come as long one did not give up. However, Yi Si did not have the patience to wait for it. Oh. That was the only response that Lu Chang could offer. She pinched her leg and the pain almost made her jump. It's real, Lu Chang murmured to herself. As expected, Lu Chang was way luckier than Yi Xi ever was. The 3 bosses yielded 6 blue items. 2 leather armor, 2 cloth armor and 2 chainmail. The blue equipment obtained from the dungeons were far superior to the exchangeable items. Although none of the 6 were part of the Frost series, it was still sought after by players very much. A huntress could only equip leather armor at the early stage of the game, therefore Yi Xi placed the 2 leather armor into her inventory. Lu Chang was using a class that required cloth armor, and the 2 cloth armor were no doubt hers. The 2 chainmail were for Dan Yin and Yi Tsang, as the former was a warrior while the latter a knight. Yi Xi intended to mail them the equipment after leaving the dungeon. Of the 2 leather armor, one was a clothing while the other was a gauntlet. Although they did not possess the agility and speed buff that Yi Xi was looking forward to, they were way superior to her current equipment. She equipped the leather armor and cleared away the mobs, preparing to leave the dungeon. Lu Chang was very happy with her armor. She caressed it repeatedly before remembering something. Little Ci, how did you clear this dungeon alone? Yi Xi stared at Lu Chang and laughed, I had you with me. Lu Chang scratched her head and offered Yi Xi an embarrassed smile, yeah, right. Despite saying that, Lu Chang knew her limits. Even with her fire minion, her damage was not high. The LVL-1 fire minion died pretty easily. She did launch an attack or 2 from the back but the channeling time was quite long. Their combined damage output was nothing. Yi Xi's attack, on the other hand, was on an entirely different level. She had even seen the number 500 from Yi Xi's single attack. On paper, both of them were clearing the dungeon together. In reality, Yi Xi could clear this dungeon solo without a hitch, just like the mysterious person that cleared the dungeon solo. Wait a second. Thought Lu Chang, but before she could voice it out, Yi Xi said, let's not waste time, we'll clear the dungeon again. Lu Chang was puzzled, but she nodded. She could do nothing but shove down the question that was about to leave her mouth and follow Yi Xi into the dungeon. After several times journeying through the dungeon, Lu Chang finally grew familiar with the place. Other than the mobs themselves, the hardest thing about the dungeon was the need of precise positioning. She noticed that Yi Xi had not messed up her positioning even once and her movements were extremely nimble. Lu Chang knew that her plays were not top tier, but this didn't mean that she wouldn't know an expert when she saw one. She was deeply impressed by Yi Xi's gameplay. Her movements were fast, her positioning excellent, and her reaction was quick. She could handle sudden events perfectly and she rarely missed her attacks. If even this were not expert-level skills, she wasn't far from being an expert. As they went back to the newbie village for supplies, Lu Chang could no longer hold back her question. Little Ci, were you the one who cleared the dungeon solo yesterday? Yi Xi laughed and said, it was just sheer dumb luck after dying countless of times. She replied vaguely. She knew that she could not hide it forever, and since Lu Chang asked, she took the opportunity and gladly answered the question. Damn! Lu Chang's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets after receiving the answer. Yi Xi did not tell her the full truth. There was no way she could tell Lu Chang that she knew everything because she was from the future. Despite that, she made Lu Chang to keep it a secret, even from Dong Yin and Yi Tsang. Lu Chang understood Yi Xi's way of keeping a low profile, and she knew that disaster would follow if someone kept a high profile in any web game. She agreed to Yi Xi's request. Their trip was bountiful. The two already managed to change out every piece of equipment they had aside from their weapons. Yi Xi was satisfied with the +2 speed attribute of her boots. With them, she felt way more agile than when she had only been wearing the newbie boots. Lu Chang went back to the newbie village to level up her fire minions and sort out her quests. Yi Si came along with the intention of replenishing her arrows and acquiring the huntress's trademark skill, pet raising. The duo parted ways at the crossroads. Lu Cheng headed for the Lekan newbie village while Yi Si went to Natasha's cottage. There were more hunters buying arrow from Natasha, bringing about a lively atmosphere to the otherwise quiet cottage. Yi Si handed 10 silver coins. Natasha glanced at Yi Si, her beautiful eyes forming into slits. Young huntress, was your adventure in Icy Cave hard? Not bad, it's quite interesting. Yi Si offered her a smile. Natasha raised her eyebrows at the answer, nodded and said slowly, do you know of a legend? What legend? The great elven king sealed his soul away at the end of the world, far, far away. The way to the place where his soul was sealed is drawn on a map. If you can find it. A cunning smile lit up Natasha's usually pretty but emotionless face. And after I found it. This was yet another quest that Yi Si had never heard of. She couldn't help but think. How many hidden quests are there that players do not know of in this vast world of fate? Natasha laughed lightly. She held her fingers at her lips lightly and laughed. She laughed like a vixen, and her laugh was very seductive. If you can find that map, I think I might tell you. The system notification chimed in right after her words. Do you want to accept the hidden quest if you can find that map? Yi Si accepted the quest without hesitation. Such hidden quests were rare, there was no way she was going to let it slip by her. Besides, Yi Si was interested in something that even she had no knowledge of in her past life. The NPCs in Fate had the tendency of using players as their mule. Just like the honest village chief, Natasha gave Yi Si a skill book. Magical Arrow Crafting. An ancient arrow crafting technique able to craft arrows with magical properties. Requires. Mid-tier arrow crafting. Yi Si looked at the skill books with a heart full of sorrow. The 2 top-tier arrow crafting skill books owned by her could not be used due to her low proficiency in arrow crafting. Was there something more saddening than that in this world? She angrily stored the magical arrow crafting skill book into her inventory and rushed towards the newbie village. Before Yi Si could go far, she noticed that the road ahead was blocked by a large crowd. This place was booked by the Spring Rain Guild. All of you, go somewhere else. A male voice could be heard over all the commotion.